called an owl. It kind of looks like an owl. It what? Oh. I look like her, camera has worked to do that, but now it has this thing where it cuts everyone's
So all I
heads
need
out
to do is
in
log
the
in
conference room and
and
displays
share.
them somehow individually
Did you create a
on the screen.
PDF?
It's creepy.
Yeah, the one that sort of does that, it likes to kind of dramatically zoom in, like we'll start all hand out right as the meeting starts, if somebody talks, to weigh in on their face.
That's not to look. No, we are.
Oh, library Wi-Fi. I learned from last time that sometimes it's better to have the be able to log in Zoom so I can see,
Yeah, better, yeah, so you don't have to like crane your neck the whole time.
or like if you have all the participants up.
Mm.
Recording in progress.
Alec, you taking minutes?
Yes.
Thank you. Third SPL Wi-Fi.
Lena, can you hear us?
I can hear, Greg, is that you?
Yeah.
You're faint, but I think I think I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good.
Where do you set the thing?
Ian and Tom, I see you shared a memo when it comes to the color.
Yeah, it's called Damp Maroon.
Yeah, this used to be a brighter red when I left the house.
I once went to a Ted Leo concert. He started off in a nice light blue shirt. By the end of the concert, it was dark blue, and it was a great concert, but it was pretty gross.
Hey, folks.
Good.
Good.
chat is disabled for non-panelists.
Yeah, I was about to attend in person and confess that it started pouring as I was.
Yes, we saw.
Yeah.
I think the chat, so you should,
Well,
analysts.
you came,
Good build.
saw, and conquered.
I was at Trump Field for the girls softball team was playing some of my daughter's first game. So I was like, oh, I can swing by that. It's already outside. I don't think they're still outside.
Yeah, that was pretty blurry.
The community path drains really well though, so that's great.
Glad to hear that.
And almost got, swept away by the foot of water coming down School Street. Turn around, don't drown.
Yeah, that's what you get when you build hills and create giant bowls.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say the drainage down School Street, given the grade, would be.
It's just a lot of water. It's going the right direction, but it's gonna take you with it.
Yeah.
Lost 3 oxen fording the river.
Classic. All right, I believe we have quorum. I observed 6 out of 7 community members and several ex officios. So I believe we have quorum, so we can go ahead with roll call as folks trickle in. Welcome, folks. My name is Tom Lamar, and I'm chair of the committee. I'll go through roll call first for community members, then ex officios, and then we'll give guests a chance to introduce themselves. Next up, Lena.
Hi, Vice Chair of the committee, Ward 7 resident.
Welcome, Lena. Ted
Hi.
Feldman.
Hey, folks. Ted Feldman, secretary of the committee, Ward 5 resident.
Gregory Ely, I see you just joined.
Greg Ely, member of the committee.
Welcome. Alex Frieden.
Hi, Alex Frieden, member of the committee, Ward 2 residents.
Welcome, Alex. Mark Bollinger.
Hello, member of the committee, Ward 4 resident.
Welcome, Mark. Ian.
Ian Ocean, member of the committee, Ward 7 resident.
All right. Next are ex officios. I do not observe Councilor Burnley here. So we'll go to Viola.
Viola Augustine, Mobility Division with the City of Somerville liaison and ex officio to the committee.
Greg Hannafin.
Greg Hannafin, transportation planner in mobility. Also similar to Viola, liaison to the committee.
And Eric.
Eric Wiseman, DPW, Ward 6.
Welcome, Eric. Thanks for joining us tonight. So with that, we do indeed have quorum, including all community members of the committee present. Next up, any guests? Welcome, brief introduction, and anything in particular that brings you here tonight. Amanda.
Hello, my name is Amanda Reichel. I'm incoming committee member. Just want to attend my first meeting before we start in earnest. I guess I'm in Ward 3.
Welcome, glad to have you here. Thanks for coming. Paul.
I'm Paul Morgan, also incoming member starting next month, and I'm Ward 5.
Welcome, Paul. That'll on a guest that I see on the Zoom. Staff, please unmute them and present, Maria and then Stephen. Maria, welcome.
Hi, it's Maria. I'm in Ward 2 and I'm also an incoming member. So nice to meet you all.
All right, thanks for joining us tonight and welcome. And Stephen.
Hi, this is Stephen Mackey. I'm a resident. Thank you.
All right, welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight, Stephen. Let's see. Couple of meeting logistics in general. So in general, this meeting will go similarly in terms of logistics to last month's meeting. So we anticipate doing roll call votes, etc. Generally speaking, I think it will be the same as last month's meeting. Staff, any corrections or any logistics?
Nope, at this time, same as last month, and yeah, we'll continue to let you know if there are any updates on the administrative side of things.
All right. And in general for discussions, I think, just so folks know, they'll be primarily among, current members of the committee, including ex officios. But we do generally, try to give guests a chance to comment as well if they're interested, on most items. And we also very much look forward to folks joining us as full members in the future. Any questions about, any logistics? And I'll also ask any items that we should take out of order, anything that we ought to leave early, anything like that. All right, seeing none, we'll do our best to go through the items in order. Next up, our acting secretary is Alex. Thank you for taking minutes. Any questions about that? Nope. All right, as you know, feel free to interrupt to clarify as needed with anything. Yes. Thank you. Hey, welcome. Next up, we have approval of the April meeting minutes. Any questions, comments, suggestions about the April meeting minutes before we move to approve? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the April meeting minutes?
All motion to approve.
Right, motion by Ian, seconded by Lena. All members in favor, please say aye, raise your hand, otherwise, or I apologize. I'm getting used to roll call. I'll do a roll call vote of members, apologies. Tom Lamar, aye. Lena,
Yes.
yes. Ted Feldman,
Yes.
Gregory Ely,
Yes.
Alex Frieden. Yes. Mark Bollinger,
Abstain.
Ian Wolusin,
Yes.
Viola, Augustine,
Abstain.
Craig Hanafin,
Abstain.
Eric Weissman.
Abstain.
Thanks, folks. The April meeting minutes are approved. Next up, call for any upcoming outreach items. Anybody have items coming up to share? I know mobility is some to share. We'll get to those later. Ted Bellman.
Yeah, I was gonna just give an update. I did have a chance to stop by Whole Foods. The manager wasn't there. It is still Amy, and she has a new email address, so I will follow up and confirm the bike breakfast there for the end of the month, and send out details. But the hope is May 29th at 8 a.m. on the Whole Foods on Beacon Street.
Awesome. And I see that that is Wednesday. So as we discussed, we will try. We'll indeed try the middle of the week.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, for anyone not familiar, that's an outreach event we've done before and hope to resume of hosting a breakfast at Whole Foods on Beacon Street for commuters passing by. Hey, anything else? That is not an upcoming event, but I just want to call out that Bike Month kickoff was fantastic. Kudos to Lena and everyone else involved in planning that. All right, any other events come to mind, please feel free to share them in the chat or otherwise. Okay. Next up is our discussion with DPW. So for context, we've had a number of questions as a committee for various matters relating to DPW. We consolidated a few of these questions, and we're glad to have our liaison, Eric Weissman of the DPW, joining us tonight. With that, I will hand it over to Eric for how you want to kick off this discussion.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. I was wondering if I could share, I put a few slides together to go over the questions. I'd like to just run through those, and then if there's additional questions, happy to answer.
I think you should be able to share, Eric.
All right. Right. So thank you for having me. Excuse the date. Okay. So I divided the questions into some broad categories. There were some questions on materials, so I'll start with those. What's the flex post replacement management process? And at the moment, we are mainly responding to service requests that come in via 311 or other direct communications. 311 is always like a preferred way for things to come in. It allows us to track things. It sort of dovetails with some of our other operations. So if I could make a request, any request can come in via 311. That would be really helpful, and you can always reach out directly. We meet regularly with the mobility team to go over larger interventions, installations, changes, things like that. We conduct some regular sort of regular maintenance, like sweeping with small sweepers of separated facilities. And we also do seasonally proactive inspection, installation, and maintenance. So if you've seen us out recently, I think over the last couple of weeks, we've been doing a bunch of flex post replacements. And then there was a question about, do precast concrete curbs prevent additional maintenance challenges over flex posts? They're somewhat more difficult to install and repair just due to the materials, but maintenance in and around them shouldn't be much more difficult than flex posts, assuming that we have the space to get in to sweep and things like that. So I hope that answers that question. And then there were some questions about vehicles and vehicle safety. So do we have an idling policy for our vehicles? Absolutely. We observe the anti-idling law, but there are times that we have to idle beyond the 5 minutes, or it's operationally helpful to have engines running for certain pieces of equipment that might run off the trucks, lighting, emergency flashers, things like that. Often also people are out for extended periods of time in particularly cold weather, but we do discourage unnecessarily idling. Any complaints we get about idling, we follow up with staff, try to get an explanation of what's going on. And then there was a question about the intelligent speed assistance. So we had purchased 8 devices this year. We learned that the firmware needed to be updated, so we sent that equipment back. It recently came back, and we have installation scheduled with the manufacturer tentatively for the week of May 20th. There's some scheduling that's a pretty solid date. It's not 100% solid, and we're just checking to see whether there needs to be any negotiation with the union on this before we actually do the installation. So that's sort of happening in the background because we want to meet all of our bargaining obligations. The previous trial was in an administrative vehicle, so that wasn't an issue. Okay, so I think these questions were generated from a vehicle that was parked in the bike lane on Holland Street to do some cleanup of the statue park right there. So this question is about like what is our strategy to minimize obstructions of bike and pedestrian facilities, and like what instructions are given to staff. And I just want to sort of take a step back to say that that some old habits die hard, and there are some people that are used to doing business in a certain way. They aren't used to the new facilities. So this is sort of like an ongoing growth experience for us and for a lot of our staff. But I think our general approach is to try not to obstruct whenever possible. If it's anytime it's operationally feasible, avoid parking in a bike facility. And to find an alternate location to park vehicles and equipments. This is an issue we have with bike lanes. It's also an issue with crosswalks. We're always sort of taking feedback about these things and trying to incorporate them into our operations. Occasionally, temporary disruption is unavoidable, and in those cases, we try to minimize impact. So if our staff must park in a bike lane, do so at a location or time that minimizes impact to bike facility users. With the Holland bike lane question issue, we pushed that activity to later in the day so it wouldn't impact the time as much, and then actually shifted it to a different location. And then we encourage them to get out of the bike lane as quickly as possible. And when we are taking a lane, try to make the lane safe by putting lane closure sign as far up as possible, use flashers and cones to make it visible as early as possible. So a few areas were called out, Holland Street, which I mentioned. So we've transitioned to parking on Winter Street whenever possible. Failing that, trying to park on the sort of shared right turn bike lane. This is a strategy we came up with through consultation with the mobility department. We're also just trying in general to avoid busy times of day. That is a particularly challenging area because sometimes those barrels get quite heavy. So we're trying to come up with a way to minimize impact there and avoid parking in that bike lane, that especially in that spot that blocks visibility for the crosswalk. I didn't have so much context for the Marshall Street counterflow lane, but looking at that, I imagine that's when we're servicing the Marshall Street Park that we're pulling over into the bike lane, the counterflow lane, and then bikes are sort of forced around like a trash truck or something like that. So we had a conversation with our trash truck driver. So we're going to try to nose into the playground entrance if possible. So that sounds like bad. It's not, there's like a plaza outside of the playground where a small vehicle could be accommodated. The trash truck will try to park across the street if possible, but may take the full lane to sort of preserve the counterflow lane. And we also talked about the time of day that we would be doing that to try to avoid rush hour where there's, more vehicles, more bikes, and so on and so forth. And Summer Street, again, I assume this is around the Nunziato Park, but there wasn't too much context here. Same thing. Trash trucks will try to park on Prescott or across the street. Just, not to get too gross, but the dog park trash barrels can become quite heavy. So that can be like a difficult area, but we had a conversation with our trash truck driver, and it's something we'll be looking out for. And I assume that Morse Kelly isn't as much of an issue because they're pulling onto Craigie Street, right? Well, and you can let me know later. So this was a great question. What can community members do to support DPW in prioritizing transportation safety? So we are committed to prioritizing safety of vulnerable road users. I think we've done a lot in this regard. We provide training to all incoming staff. And it's something we talk about a lot. Anytime that we have a report of somebody doing something unsafe, or we observe somebody doing unsafe, it's absolutely something we follow up with. And then unfortunately, occasionally we need operational access to locations throughout the city. And I think that that can be disruptive, not only to cyclists, but to pedestrians and to drivers. And we really do try to attempt to limit those interruptions. We're trying to learn to do that more safely when we do have to occupy facilities. We've just recently purchased lane closure signs. I know the highway department is looking at some more targeted bike signage for their dedicated bike vehicles and trailers. So yeah, again, we're trying to do what we can to limit those interruptions, and particularly in situations where that could make a cyclist unsafe, but we occasionally do have like operational needs. And I think like in terms of like what the community can do to support us in this is like when we look at facilities and designs of facilities, help advocate for dedicated access for DPW equipment that doesn't put staff at risk. So if that's dedicated temporary loading spaces for DPW around schools or city buildings, parks, playgrounds, that sort of thing is something that we haven't thought too much of in the past. Like when we're analyzing plans, up to now, we've really just been thinking about like, can we do the maintenance for the facility itself, and not as much about like, well, how does this, how will this actually impact the day-to-day? So we're having more and more of these conversations with mobility. You guys have a really good eye for this stuff, so if you could advocate for that as well, that would be really helpful. So that's what I have. Happy to take other questions or comments.
All right, with that, let's open it up for questions or discussion from committee members, and then we'll try to hear from guests as well afterwards. Ian, I think I saw your hand up.
Sure. So I want to clarify, there's two kinds of things that I was seeing happening with DPW vehicles obstructing bicycle infrastructure crosswalks. There's like a trash truck coming through. No one is, upset about the trash, or everyone's upset about the trash truck, I can say. Like, oh, it's in my way. You deal with it. That's part of living in the city. That's not a problem. It's kind of a temporary thing. It's when you have a vehicle sitting there, and I'm the one that was reporting the one in Holland. There's probably like 100 301 tickets about it, because it was the same vehicle. I don't know if it was the same operator, because the operator was nowhere to be seen. They weren't hauling trash. They were maybe cleaning the park. Who knows?
Yeah.
But the truck was
Yeah,
parked in a really unsafe way, and like time after time after time, I filed these 301 requests and nothing happened until I demanded to talk to Commissioner Lathan, and like, that's not good. I don't want to waste our time, but that was the only thing I could do to get impact. And I think that's why you're here tonight. And I really appreciate this. This is like, there's a great learning process happening. And I'm really glad to hear it. I just want to make sure that like the behaviors that I saw are truly in the past.
Yeah. So that one in particular is something, yeah, you're right. The person was stick picking the park, or debrising the park.
Important.
I really think, what's that?
And that's important. I don't want to minimize, like, you shouldn't do that work, but we can do that much better.
It is important, but if there is a way to lessen the impact to users of the facilities, that's what we want to do. Ultimately, with that location, we gave that a lot of thought, and working with Adam and his team, we identified a spot on Winter Street where we could meet our operational needs. It wasn't occupied often, but like, having these conversations with mobility, like sort of one of the things we sort of realized, like, okay, right now we don't need a dedicated, loading zone or something like that to dedicate to a piece of equipment that is regularly servicing the plaza. But it's something to think about, like with the next phase of changes that come to Davis, like where are we going to put the pieces that need to be there in a way that's safe for everybody? I think if it was like, wheeling out 75-pound boxes, that location wouldn't work as well, and we'd have to come up with a process that could, temporarily shut down the lane. But that was when we sort of just all scratched our heads, looked at the map and said, hey, this isn't so bad. You still have access to a ramp. And then like we even came up with the secondary plan of at lower, less busy times, taking one of two lanes on College Ave and still having access to the plaza. So, and we also sort of spoke with other staff that has to access the plaza. So that vehicle that you were encountering was a part of our grounds crew, but our highway crew also often services that plaza for trash. So they had ideas about what approaches worked for them. Our highway superintendent, who some of you have interacted with, like also happens to have come up from the highway department. So he had firsthand knowledge of like, what is it like to empty the trash there? And he said, hey, I always preferred to take the college side rather than the Holland Street side, even before there was bike lanes there. So we are sort of all looking at this and like coming up with ways that we can still, meet the demands of residents, but keep things safe.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, other questions or comments from committee? Alex?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. This is great. Alex Free, and I live in Ward 2. I'm the person who added the precast concrete
Okay. Yep.
question. So, well, my anecdotal experience is that these work very well and require very limited amounts of repair from the amount of times I've seen them being repaired. One thing we've talked about on the committee is having an escalation for hardening when bollards are destroyed, to have something that is far more resilient to, Neil has pointed out, the more useful they are, the higher chance they have of being destroyed.
Yeah.
Which is a very appropriate comment. And so as we think about deploying some of these in very high risk situations, which is where they're most needed, it'd be good to have, mobility and DPW collaborate on what that hardening policy and procedure looks like.
Yeah. At some point earlier on in sort of like the big process, we looked at rubber parking backstops as like sort of something in between. You can get those somewhat cheaply from some of our vendors. We ended up not going through that way. But precast concrete is another thing we looked at. I think we even talked to mobility about purchasing molds to pour our own. But I don't remember exactly where that landed. So yeah, I mean, we're happy to work with mobility on this and engineering on that kind of thing. I should know this, but like, is there anywhere in Cambridge or nearby we could take a look at one?
Yeah, so Mass Ave in Boston does this particularly well. I've never seen them being replaced. They've been moved for plowing work. And then Brattle in Cambridge.
You said they remove them for plowing?
Yeah, there's some work I've seen where they've removed them for some
like snow removal.
Snow removal, but they also, if you're putting the stuff there, it also operates as a step down to separate out the traffic anyway. So there's I'm not convinced that there's value in trying to plow in between as frequently as you need plow the bike lane, sidewalks, and road otherwise.
Interesting. Yeah, I'd like to take a look at it and talk to them about how that operation is.
Yeah.
Other questions from the committee? I'll add one. I was curious to chat more about what infrastructure gives DPW safer operational access, and I like that framing. I was thinking about some other things that some cities have done, and I'm curious for your reaction to any of these. I know some cities have looked at wider protected bike lanes overall. I think in some cities even aiming to have the protected bike lane to be wide enough that like a full pickup truck could fit in there as needed. that does kind of constrain where, or like how much parking the city might have to remove to make room for the protected bike lane. But it does give much better access either for other vehicles or for bikes to go around the vehicle in the lane.
Yeah.
Follow-on question to that.
And then I also just really like the loading zone suggestion. I know the loading zones are important for a number of other reasons, and it seems like there's maybe a lot of value in like really leaning into more loading zones near major protected bike lanes for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, and like, so I'll take the second part first. Like we tend not to need a loading zone for the full portion of the day. So one thing we talked to mobility about when this first came up was like a limited window where DPW would need it. Then in the evenings, it's just regular parking, or, you know, for business parking or however, you know, they want to deal with that. And then I think like sometimes plazas can be built to be serviced, like some area that, like, one of the things we looked at and ultimately decided not to do because, you know, there's just too much activity in that particular area. But like pulling onto the plaza, getting completely off the road, in some situations that's appropriate, in others it's not. And then for the wider bike facilities, like I've always thought about this in terms of sweeping. It's really becomes our challenge where I'm trying to think like the Medford Street by Cambridge, I think was difficult with some of our equipment to sweep. That's like the narrow spots under the bridge, and debris would collect there. Wider bike lanes. Yeah, wider bike lanes would be better, but I don't know, like some spots it might be too claustrophobic. I'm not sure. But yeah, I do think like we have invested in this smaller bike lane. Like it's easy to say, yeah, give us the wide lane and we'll take the pickup truck on it. But you're right, like if we use some of our smaller equipment, like the Ventrex and things like that, we could have it on a wider lane and have plenty of room to pass. And that was our thinking on the path. What we found is we could squeeze a small pickup with a plow on it down some parts of that path, but it's always easier to have smaller equipment in those wider spaces.
Makes sense. Ian?
You sort of answered this question, but I want to push on this thread a little bit more. One thing that we talked about in the past is the size of equipment. This usually comes up with like the fire department saying, well, we can't put a flex post here because the fire truck has to get past it. And you're like, okay, well, can you get a smaller fire truck? And they always say no. And we kind of leave it at that.
Yeah.
Has DPW considered, getting a Ford Maverick instead of a Ford F-350 or getting a cargo trike, because you can then just roll it right up onto the plaza and it's not in the way, because all of us parents are doing that with our cargo bikes already. And, I realize there's reasons to have big pickup trucks, and maybe because you already have them, that is the best option. I'm
Okay.
not sure.
If DPW gets a cargo trike, I'm getting it before anybody else does.
No, I fully support that. So let me know what we need to do to advocate for that. But yeah, just kind of like is there an opportunity to think outside the box, or cargo bike or whatever, to do the better thing? And you kind of said there's a lot of old habits dying hard, and I realize that collective bargaining might be like, no, I'm not riding a cargo trike, but you get one guy on it who goes, oh my god, this is great, we should all do it. And that's all you need.
Yeah, so I think like where like fire truck scale equipment matters for us is things like our tree truck with a boom, like a boom, and we have 10-wheelers that we use for snow, particularly on our crosstowns and mains, which is I don't know, you guys call them something else, or like the planning department calls them something else, but your Somerville Ave, your connectors and your
arterials.
Arterials, yes, excuse me. So those need to be large because they need to move heavy snow, or haul heavy materials and stuff like that. Like what we're finding is like smaller equipment is better for navigating some of our narrower spaces. We want to put like large equipment on big roads and you know, like, I think that will almost always be a thing.
Yeah, but the smaller roads or the paths, like, is
Yeah,
it just an opportunity? Not, like, I'm not saying go out and buy all this new stuff today. That's not reasonable if we have a lot of existing equipment, but equipment ages out, it depreciates,
yeah.
like, is there opportunities to do this over the next, like, 5 years?
Well, so
Can
we have invested in like smaller equipment for the bike facilities, like, you know, with trailers, with things like that. You know, it's interesting, like, I'm sure everybody's noticed the size of like, like, residential, or I don't know, civilian trucks. I think we're seeing the same trend where we used to buy these small GMCs. They're like harder to get. I think like there's like some smaller Ford trucks that we're looking at. But you know, like there are particular equipment needs that we have where you know, you can't really put a plow on everything. Like the frame just won't withstand it. Um, so yeah, I mean, like, I think that would be a bigger cultural shift. Um, but I think at some point, like, the realities of navigating the city, I think will sort of push vehicles to be smaller.
Cool.
Quick time check, hoping to wrap up this item by 7:15 or so. So I'll ask for any other comments from committee members, and then I want to give guests a chance to chime in as well. If like
There
other
is a
questions or
Q&A.
That's so yeah, guests, if you're on the Zoom, feel free to enter anything into the Q&A and or raise your hand on Zoom. In-person folks, when we get to it, feel free to raise your hand in person.
Oh, I'm just saying that there is an open one, and I believe
Yeah.
it's on part of the slideshow.
Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, go ahead, Ian.
So Zachary asks, does making the lane safe include using cones to provide cyclists a safe path around the vehicle? Or do you still expect cyclists to merge into the traffic lane?
That's a great question. I think it sort of depends on the situation on the road. I think we would like to, you know, create an alternate lane whenever possible. I know this is coming up with some sidewalk work that's coming up where we're looking at trying to expedite the breakout and pouring process to limit the interruption, but also having cones around it. Sorry, I don't have the exact location off the top of my head. I think sometimes it makes sense and sometimes the road is too narrow to really do that. I think like what we could do is like give people as much clearance and like room to do that merge as possible to do it safely. And that's what we've sort of tried to express to our staff about, like, you know, where to place a cone, that it's not just dropping a cone, it's like, you know, sort of to be more thoughtful.
Or you know, big things like sidewalk reconstruction, not like a temporary, like 5-minute thing. Sending out some sort of notice, like this road is going to not have bike facilities for the day or week or month, can help set expectations. And, you know, before I leave my house, I go, I'm not going that way. It's gonna be terrible.
And not happening, yeah.
You know, versus coming up on it in the moment and going, these guys. So.
Yeah, totally.
All right, let's open it up. Members of the public, in addition to members, any other questions or comments?
Good. Quick question. What's an intelligent speed limiter?
Sure. So, yeah, also described as like a governor. This is something that there's a few different technologies, but the one we were looking at uses a GPS layer to identify the speed limit of a given road or piece of road and actually limit the driver's ability to accelerate beyond the speed limit. They also often have restrictions on like sudden acceleration and things like that. This one does as well. So we tried it in my vehicle as sort of like a plug and play installation, and we ordered some more permanent ones. And so I think like there's also other systems that I think use like optical recognition of signs and things like that. But yeah, basically, forces the vehicle to remain within the speed limit.
Yes, we can. That's maybe fine.
Other questions or comments?
Yeah, I'm curious to your point, and thank you again for joining us. About, if we could point to bike infrastructure that we've installed where we've done, a good job of taking into account safety for DPW crew, and maybe an example of a place where could be better, in the city.
I guess I also want to just reset our expectations on what reasonable lane width is, because we have situations in the city where we have 10-foot lanes, and we've placed in the city where they're legal 6-foot lanes. So there's quite a discrepancy here. And that we should be comfortable, depending on the situation, with the small end or the large end.
Yeah, for the where it's been successful and where it hasn't, I think like off the top of my head, like some of the new construction sometimes seems easier, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not quite prepared to answer that question. I'd have to give it some thought.
I think I may
Yeah, it's
have.
probably the places that we don't hear complaints are the
Yeah.
successful ones, and the ones we do hear complaints are the unsuccessful ones. It's sort of like a probably true, but unsatisfying answer. Yeah, I'd want to give it more thought. Sorry, I don't have a good answer off the top of my head.
I think
It'd be kind of good to do a case study. I don't know, maybe I can
Yeah.
talk to mobility about that.
Yeah, I
What-
think it would be good for us to have like the lessons learned, and
What works,
have
what doesn't. Yeah.
One thing that we can do as a committee is when we're looking at plans for new infrastructure, just have in the back of our head, like, oh, there's a plaza here. How would DPW service it? And say, hey, mobility, when we're putting the bike lane in, that parking spot there probably should be a loading zone. Not just, oh, loading zones are good, but like there should be a loading zone here. And what would be really beneficial here is having someone from DPW attending lots of our meetings and speaking up and advocating for yourselves as well, because you know better than we do of what your needs actually are. We just think loading zones are probably really important to put in when we put bike lanes in.
Yeah, we do review the plans, but sometimes you kind of get like tunnel vision on these things and don't like I think I've frustrated Viola quite a bit where, she'll say, well, like, you said this was fine when we met about this 2 months ago. And I say, well, like, yeah, I was thinking about this aspect of maintaining it, but I didn't think about like all the trash that's going to collect in this thing,
So we do
So,
the same for bikes too, though. So don't feel
yeah.
bad. Sorry, Viola.
All right, I do not see any further questions. So I'll also say for follow-ups, I know we discussed a few different locations for precast concrete curbs that work well, and I can work with mobility to pass on some examples of places that we
Yeah,
like.
I'd love to take a look.
All right, Mark.
I just wrote a question in the chat around placing cones. You mentioned it's kind of more on a case by case basis. Is it possible for you guys to create guidance, like actually written guidance?
Yeah.
So we're not
We were just
asking
talking about
our
this today. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm looking at your question in the chat. Yeah, we just talked about this today. I'd love to see what resources there are out there. I think a lot of the like work zone safety training is sort of catered towards, like opening up large roads and things like that. And that's not exactly what we're doing here and what we're talking about. So Yeah, there's some resources like Bay State Roads, for the UMass Transportation Center that might have some ideas about this stuff. I think there's like definitely a training opportunity and sort of like an internal, um, some sort of internal document possible for sure.
Yeah, like you don't even have to go out completely outside. I'm sure we could like as Somerville residents and workers alike, we could probably make our own guidance. Like, hey, on this street, which mimics 20 other streets, this is what you do. Here's a couple photos. Like that type of guidance where we're not asking any of our employees to actually think too hard about this because like they have other tasks that they need to do, and this should just be kind of a no-brainer. Like, oh, I'm here. I need to place the cones like this.
Yeah.
It's like
I
on your
I
seatbelt.
I don't want to take up too much time, but it's like really interesting to like compare these questions to like our pothole crew, which just stops the road, right? The hot top truck is in the middle of the road, they're shoveling asphalt out, they're stamping it down, and then they drive away. And there's no question of where you're gonna go, it's nowhere. So
That's like the trash
yeah,
truck though, right?
yeah,
Like,
like the trash truck, yeah.
yeah.
Um,
I think
so
there's that fun thing where it's longer than a trash truck, it's not all day.
yeah,
It falls into that gray zone and it's just never quite clear what the best thing to do is, and it'd be great to clarify that, and I think
yeah,
the committee is probably happy to help. I certainly am, I assume everyone else is as well, so.
yeah,
Well, thank you for coming, this is great.
sure.
Hope to see you more.
Thank you,
Awesome.
guys.
Thanks for joining us, Eric.
Thanks.
All right, our next item is the committee reviewing conceptual designs for West Broadway. So for much of this, I'll share my screen with a copy of some city slides from before. Check that I have permission. All right, so this is a copy of the city slides from the recent community meeting. I'll drop a link in the Zoom chat as well for reference. These are just the same slides that the city has previously shared. So overall, staff, I know we discussed this since there's already context online and at a previous meeting, but we wouldn't spend much time on that. We would basically dive right into the committee discussion. But I just wanted to ask first if there's any context you'd like to add.
So this is part of, as we've discussed before, part of our annual streets package, complete streets redesign of section of Broadway between Elwayford Parkway and Clarendon Ave. At the most basic level, it's repaving the street, reconstructing the sidewalks, but we have opportunity to make safety improvements. And earlier this month, we released our conceptual design, which we are now in the process of getting feedback on.
Awesome. Thanks for the context. Did folks have a chance to look over the design in general? Right. So with that, I'll maybe very briefly skim through these slides showing what it is, and then we'll jump into discussion. And then towards the end of this item, we'll move to I'll take notes on member suggestions as we go, and then we'll consolidate and vote on to endorse a statement. Good. All right, so high level, safer crosswalks, faster buses, protected bike lanes, street parking on one side, and street beautification. Yeah, as folks may have seen, the design, as I understand it, on Broadway, going from Elwayford Parkway to just outside Teal Square, typically includes protected bike lanes in both directions, typically raised to sidewalk level on one side, behind floating bus stops, typically street level behind precast concrete curbs or similar on the other side for most of the area. There are a few sections overall where there are several different possible concepts proposed. Definitely interested in members' take on which concepts we prefer. And yeah, there are other sections, but I think that's relatively typical overall.
With that, any particular item, yeah, let's open up the discussion. Any particular items that members want to highlight, or any preferences?
We can certainly keep talking, but if anyone else wants to go.
Start us talking.
Can you go back to the other slide that had the 3 options?
Yeah, or is it easier to have this overall kind of zoom in?
Yeah, that's fine. Over on the left side, the 3 options by the Stop and Shop. One thing I just want to point out that I noticed here was the only option that I think is really safe is really the second one, concept 2. And the reason is you got the downhill bike lane. So you basically have 2 lanes of traffic that potentially could be moving fast, or worse, the bikes are going and the cars are stuck in traffic. So allowing a spot for pedestrians to safely look between lanes of traffic, I think is going to be a big difference versus the other 2 options where there's not a space to wait between the general traffic lane and bikes. I hope that people are going to respect pedestrians in the crosswalk, but I know it's also sometimes easy for the pedestrian to leap out from behind the car, at least from the perspective of a cyclist or motorist. So giving pedestrians a safe refuge island there, I think makes the most sense versus putting it on the south side where cyclists are generally going pretty slow because it's uphill or, things like that. So that one really stuck out at me. I like that there were the 3 options, though. I wouldn't have noticed it if you did not present options. I would have just said, oh, I guess that's the way it is. But as soon as I saw the option, I said, oh my gosh, this is like a really big difference.
Gotcha. Making sure I'm capturing that correctly, sort of saying strongly preferring, you're suggesting strongly preferring concept 2 on here for similar reasons to why we would be skeptical of 2 vehicular travel lanes in the same direction at higher speed. Okay. I saw hands, I think, from Ted, and did I see one from Mark as well?
Yes, I realized we're talking about this segment. I had some more ideas there, but I generally agree with Ian. I think I like the concept 2 design as well.
I agree with Ian, and I was gonna say we definitely should get PTAC's voices on this.
Procedurally, I will say with PTAC, sort of I think the way that it will go with the city is that there's approximately 1 month-ish comment period in which they're hoping to hear from each advisory committee. So we probably will not have a chance to wait for an official PTAC meeting, hear back, and then have an official committee meeting to endorse that. But we could certainly say what we think our preference is and reiterate that the city should listen to PTAC on whatever they prefer.
One more thing with this area. I don't know, it's out of project scope, judging by the coloring, but the exit of the bike lane into the intersection at Route 16, what signalization are cyclists going to be following? Are they using the crosswalk signal? Is there going to be bike signal heads put there? I doubt it, but that is kind of an obvious gap. Same thing going the other way, because you're basically transitioning to, I think we call it a shared use path on the Mystic River or Alewife Brook side of Route 16.
Or nothing.
There are plans. Yeah. Saw them on Sunday. There are plans for Broadway, but not sure when. But it's DCR. I know that our hands may be tied, but if we do nothing, people are going to do dumb things there. Cyclists and motorists and pedestrians will probably be fine, but trying to anticipate that and give people good options instead of no options.
So yeah, as you said, there as part of this project, it's not within scope to make any signal changes to the DCR signals, but we have gotten state money to do a study of this intersection, which has started, and there is going to be a process to make changes to the Route 16 Broadway intersection that we hope are happening somewhat adjacent to this project, but there's not an exact timeline for that yet.
In the interim, when this work is done, can we put a cyclist may use crosswalk sign up so that way legally cyclists are allowed to use it? And whoever, I guess it'd be state police, cannot harass cyclists for doing what is the obvious safe thing. They're in
Yeah,
Harvard
that's something-
Square, so
Yeah.
I assume they're legal.
So the city wouldn't be able to put that sign up, but it's something that we could advocate
Okay.
to.
Awesome.
We can't put a sign up on, and we're talking about putting it up on municipal, road, not on state road. Like on Broadway.
It's
Right?
But it's
intersection.
But the curb is still owned by the city. The sidewalks,
the other side,
But not the crossing itself.
not the crossing itself, but at the right before the crossing.
Right, like, so I guess I'm saying we can't make regulations across a state road.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Got it.
cool, thank you.
Let's hear from Lena and then Ted.
Yeah, actually, that's why the Route 16 Traffic Calming Coalition had to form, because there really isn't a clear way to get change that does, kind of cross that DCR, Cambridge, Somerville, Medford, Arlington border. But I mainly wanted to say I also agree with Ian and endorse concept 2 for this. I think chicanes are great for traffic calming, slowing traffic speeds, but if we're approaching, there's traffic is always backed up here. It will always be backed up here. So let's just always remember that no matter look at Broadway of a morning now, and it's full of traffic. So when the bike lanes come, it's not their fault, by the way. But in this case, I think maintaining the straight flow of it, like traffic towards that intersection is way preferable to having kind of like, the chicanery leading into an intersection like that. So I do also endorse concept 2.
Ed?
Yeah, so I agree with Ian's concerns about that intersection being in there frequently, or being at that intersection frequently. Personally, this is one of the few intersections in the Metro Boston area where I actually, as a cyclist, go on the pedestrian signal because it's safer than waiting for the light, honestly. So it would be great to get that changed. I don't know if, because it's a DCR intersection, of something like a bike box could potentially be feasible there to at least improve visibility. It's also a right turn that I'm concerned about for both pedestrians and cyclists. So I think anything that can be done to account for that would be great. As I think about this, I like the chicane and the concept 2 design. So I would endorse that as well.
Great. Any other comments on this general area with the westernmost project area?
It's a kind of a different committee, but we do have a fair amount of trees. Not elderly trees, but trees nonetheless along this path. What's happening to them? Like, it looks like the bike lane's gonna be right there.
So there will not be any trees that are removed as part of this project unless they're dead. But all existing trees will be maintained, and we will be looking for opportunities to add new street trees.
So, like, right by what are the crosswalks that we have the 3 options? I believe are the trees depicted on the building side or the road side? Because like right now they're like inches from the curb. And if we are kind of moving parking, are we moving parking? Like
Maybe another way to think of this is the sidewalk curb line moving, or are we putting the bike lane right up against where the current curb is, and then more stuff in the street? It's like, is anything on the sidewalk staying where it is?
Yes, everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the sidewalk widths are not being narrowed at all, so any bike facilities will be taking space that is currently road or parking space.
Cool. Good to hear.
I have a quick question. Sorry if this has been covered before, but is any coordination being done with Arlington? Because there's like 2 lanes of traffic on Broadway, like just on the other side of the L-way, the Parkway, and sometimes I've seen like cars essentially just like merge into the 1 lane that like Broadway becomes. And so I don't know. It's like, is Arlington planning to, redo their streets as well, or that I just feel like it might be unsafe for.
Yeah, so we have been coordinating with Arlington, especially at the intersection, and Arlington is in the sort of preliminary stages of trying to get some work done on their section of Broadway. An advocacy group has put out some proposals, and the city, they haven't begun a formal process yet, but I know that they are looking to make some similar changes to what we're proposing on the other side of Broadway.
And also note from the chat, Gregory is suggesting a no turn on red signage at Aylesbury Parkway. Yeah. Anything else in this area? Hey, moving eastwards a little bit.
Actually, I had one question about one point of clarification on that, Tom. Just at the very end of the Route 16 Broadway segment there, is that just a painted on bike lane before it looks like where the con and concept starts? And similarly, is that just, it merges to just a striped bike lane on the side approaching Alvifebrook Parkway as well after the median? Or is that street level? Okay, so it's a PBL.
There's no existing bike infrastructure there at all.
No. What the plan there? It looks like it becomes a PBL going uphill towards Clariton, the whole extent.
There was a graphic that showed precast curbs. So maybe is the question, is there precast curbs from Route 16 all the way to Teal Square on the south side of the street?
Yes.
So if I'm understanding the question, so the eastbound direction on the south side, so what's being shown on the section that's on the street now, that is all protected, proposed to be protected with precast concrete. Further east, these plans show a transition to a sidewalk level protected bike lane. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it did. Thanks.
Yeah, if you didn't have hard protection right at the intersection, motorists are just gonna run down those flat splits real fast.
All right, moving somewhat further east, so we go past North Street with a signalized intersection and what appear to be some generous bump outs. And we have an interesting crossing here, so maybe I'll move slightly over to encompass the crossing here as well, and the concepts here. And I believe the idea is linking some quieter streets, at least some of neighborways, with various configurations, either for intersections at each of these 2 streets, or raised crosswalks, and I believe also cross bikes, or an entire raised block that I believe would begin being raised just west of the entire section of 2 intersections and continue raised at sidewalk level all the way to the east. Is that correct, staff?
That is.
Hey. questions, comments about this section and these concepts?
And I guess to give a little bit of additional context, the Endicott Avenue in the southeast of the plans and Russell Road in the northwest, those are future neighborways in the bicycle network plan. So we have prioritized this block as an important connector of those two neighborways, recognizing that anybody wanting to continue through is going to have to do a little bit of a chicane or whatever you want to call it on this block of Broadway.
What's the protection in those two spots? Is it curb separated?
On it, the bike lanes.
Yeah.
So what we're showing, I think, in concepts 1 and 2, the westbound is sidewalk level curb separation, and the south side eastbound is shown as precast concrete. In option 3, everything would be raised to sidewalk level, so bollards would be used to separate the bike lanes and the roadway.
I'll share a reaction that I had, and definitely curious for others' thoughts on here. I was a little skeptical of concept 2 with just the raised crossing, and I was a little worried that this might be too sharp of an angle for a bike to kind of tightly navigate coming up Endicott, going through this brief 2-way section here, and like turning sharply up here at various points, and potentially confusing if somebody tries to turn slightly too early, going up above or going onto the like raising section of the cross bike. So for that, I liked either of the more heavily raised options. For me, I think I prefer concept 1 of raised intersections, because I worry a little bit if the whole section is raised, then it's no longer feeling calm for cars because they've already gone over the raising. I understand it would be a different material, and if it is actually, you know, nice dense bollard, that might be fine. So I don't feel strongly between 1 versus 3, but I don't like concept 2 as much. Other reactions? I see Ian.
With concept 1, it looks like I think you're saying the westbound bike lane is sidewalk level, the eastbound bike lane is street level. Even between the 2 raised intersections, could both bike lanes be raised such that cyclists are not going up and down and up? Like on the cargo bike, that is a real pain. Certainly not the end of the world, but I figure I should ask. And then just to comment on the sharp corners in concept 2, they're no worse than School Street. And as much as I hate it, I don't think anyone's actually had a crash there yet that I've heard about. So maybe it's okay.
I have a similar reaction to when it is necessary to do sharp angles like that. It is acceptable, but when we have the option of doing this, like if we had the option of School Street and the community path having just a generous wide raised intersection, I would very much prefer that there as well.
Yeah.
Cool. I see in the chat, Lena also preferring concept 1. Other reactions or preferences here?
Yeah, I think I also prefer 1 as well.
Some questions in the Q&A as well.
I'll read them out. Joel asks if the raised block design option 3 includes textured paving to reduce car speeds. I believe that was an answer correct, that they are textured, something different. For Russell Endicott concepts of 1 and 2, is it possible to have raised crossing intersections with the sidewalk level bike lanes on both sides for that section of Broadway? Is that saying that the bike lane changes? Do we have chat enabled for everyone?
Committee members can chat to everyone, yes.
I meant everyone can chat to community members. That's like,
Oh, no, that is a city
Yeah.
policy.
okay.
We can use Q&A for guests.
Cool.
I'm confused about Zachary's question. If Zachary would like to voice up, that would be cool.
You want to move to public
They-
comments?
Sure. I'll say, feel free to continue submitting questions in the Q&A. I'd like to continue more, making sure members have had a chance to speak on everything, and then we'll more fully open it up to any public comment. Gregory, go ahead.
I was just curious, is there a reason for not having Farragut be the neighbor way so that that crossing could be potentially simplified by having by avoiding sort of the zigzag on Endicott?
So, Greg, that's probably that's a network question, and I mean, we work really hard to create a network that works overall.
Mhm.
I believe Endicott gives you better connection on the other side, towards whatever, south of Broadway.
I don't know if this was factored in to the network, but there's also that large field on
Like a
Endicott.
park, yeah.
Yeah, park down there.
Doesn't matter that Farragut is a one-way away from Broadway.
Not necessarily, it was more connecting, larger connections and connecting schools and open spaces.
Okay.
And to clarify, all neighbor ways in the bike network plan will be two-way for bikes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought that was the case. I couldn't remember if that was COVID only.
Right. Anything else from members? Let's scroll a little further to the east. Making sure we're including the intersection at Teal Square. Any questions or comments on here? Ian?
Can we get rid of the right turn at Teal Square and just have a bike lane go all the way through?
We can't get rid of the,
Or sorry, the right turn lane. Just one lane of
yeah,
traffic.
so similar to Ellwood Parkway. We, as part of this project, we won't be able to make signal changes at Teal Square, and right now, the right turn and the through are separated, the signal. But we have,
Only partially, right? There's a phase where they're both green.
there is a phase where they're both green, but that right turn. The green arrow for the right turn is green much longer than the through, and that's actually really helpful for bus operations, for the bus turning.
Bus isn't gonna fit through here though, if there's 3 cars waiting.
In the right turn lane?
I mean, that's a really short right turn lane, right? It already is really short. So if there's any amount of traffic waiting to go straight, the bus and everyone else is stuck behind that traffic. I mean, I realize I'm being really nitpicky here. I do really like this design. I also just know that
Yeah,
people are going to do dumb things if given the opportunity to do so, and this design is allowing too much to chance, I think.
yeah, so we do have some extra buffer space on the north side, and we can look at what we can do with that space to maybe, if it's possible, to fit in a bike lane on the south side of the street. But I don't think it's gonna be possible to change signal timing as part of this.
Could we just
project?
cover the right turn arrow though, or like take that off, like bag that?
So you're suggesting just having the
Yeah,
one green phase?
yeah. Like,
Um,
I'm talking real ghetto, hacky, silly things here.
Put
Trying
a
to save
trash
money.
bag over it.
Yeah, literally
We've
just.
done that on other
Yeah.
sites.
Just because there's an opportunity to do something amazing here. There's a fantastic bike lane, protected bike lane, all the way down Holland, all the way to Davis Square. If we could close this gap here, the only thing that's stopping you from going from Alewife Park or from Alewife Brook Parkway to what, all the way to Union Square or beyond is Elm Street, which is frankly wide enough that we probably could just go fix that, as well. But if we have this one gap here at Teal Square, it's like Davis Square on the community path all over again. And wouldn't it be great if we could just nip that in the bud? And I do appreciate the bus operations question or concern, but there's just not a lot of room here. Maybe we go out and count cars and eat Nassau donuts. But I just see like in traffic, it's backed up pretty far, so.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I see what you're talking about. I think I don't know enough about the signals to be able to answer that part of it, but we can definitely take it back and look at it and see what's possible.
I think if not, just knowing when we're coming back here would also be really important. If you're like, don't worry, we're definitely fixing this next year, that's great. That's the best option because then we get bus priority lights and all that. But if we're not going to come back here for 10 years, that sucks.
I'd like to hear from Gregory and then Ted. Also note, time-wise, feel free to, we'll try to wrap up soon. Feel free to also give any feedback about like overall reaction to the design. So yeah, let's hear a few more comments from members, then we'll briefly open it up to the public and then we'll take it, we'll vote as a committee to endorse our comments overall. Gregory and then Ted.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to ask if we could potentially steal room from that north side buffer for that right to putting a protected bike lane on the right side, because it sort of reminds me of Beacon Street, where you kind of get, it's like really, really great just until that last bit at the end. And I think it would be great to finish the PBL all the way through. I did want to raise one thing I forgot about the other section, is that there's one bus stop on the opposite of Belknap that is in the bike lane. And I think there are quite a number of businesses there. And it was probably going to be a good opportunity for people for parking in the bus lane. And I'm wondering if that could potentially be turned into a floating bus stop.
That'd be mine.
Yeah, so just on the corner there, I think we missed that section from the scroll from one side to the other, but
Yeah, we can take a look at what's possible. This is a tricky section because of the road width. We can't have two floating bus stops right across from each other because there's not enough width then for the protected bike lane. The challenge with the floating bus stops is you have to chicane the roads, and it has to be enough length in order to safely taper the vehicles. So we were struggling to find a location that worked here for the floating bus stop, but we can, keep looking at what is possible. If you all have any suggestions for
what's the width there, the lanes?
The lane width?
Yeah.
For vehicles?
No, do the lane, the standard lane was there. What's the width?
The travel lanes are 11 feet, I believe.
That sounds about right for the bus.
Yeah.
Well, buses, Webster is 10 feet.
Yeah, they can go less, but MBTA has always said they prefer 11 feet.
Yeah, okay.
So, and this route does see a lot of buses.
Wasn't the other challenge is that the bus stop on the south side really wants to be close to Garrison because of the West Main, is it West Main now?
That's the Weston.
Oh,
that's the
okay,
next
that's the other one.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, we're playing with multiple things here. Stop spacing, the tapers, trying not to remove all of the parking.
Or just for fun, if you did remove more parking, that you could put a floating bus stop in there?
If we removed, if you removed all of the parking west of Belknap, then you could, because you have enough space to.
I'm not saying that we
Paper.
should,
Yeah.
just, could we? Trying to think.
And bus 87 here is staying per the redesign.
Think so?
It's the 89 that I think is getting cut,
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
but I might, my bus redesign knowledge might be out of date since they kind of did it twice.
PTAC problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that we should be aware of and, not suggest silly things about, but yeah, I think that ultimately.
My question is more like if we're trying to figure out how we put a bus here and I want to make sure that there's actually a bus there. Fair.
Yeah, the 87 at least will still be here. I think I was. Yeah. Yeah, so for this bus stop, let's always note that as a conflict, even if we don't have the exact answer. Gregor, can you clarify your comment about the intersection at Teal and removing the buffer? Would the idea be a bike lane on the to the right of the right turn lane, or between lanes?
I would say to the right of the right turn lanes. 'Cause I think that's a more common bike movement now, particularly with Holland Street being completed.
Gotcha. So the idea is that we're emphasizing the bike movement turning right onto Holland Street, since that doesn't have any conflicts with right turning cars onto Holland, and that connects you to the nice bike lane on Holland. So it'll be like a right turn only bike lane.
Yeah, I think there's also opportunity to be creative with Teal Square in the future to zigzag bikes through there, but.
To Ian's point earlier, the right turn light is a single light, like as an add-on to a column. So literally just blacking out that single light would solve your right turn phase.
In that case, then I would strongly suggest we advocate that there's a single protected bike lane that runs the whole course, basically from ALF Brook Parkway all the way to Davis. Without a gap.
Certainly my vote.
Yeah.
Bus stops included, something.
Yeah, great work, city on these designs, like especially with trying to navigate moving bus stops. Holy crap.
Well, I think another thing that's important to call out, that when we first started talking about this, I think that we were told like we can't have bike facilities in both directions, like it just can't be done. It's like mostly done. That's amazing. So that's awesome.
The reason for that is because we expected to have bus lanes there.
Okay.
And that paradigm has shifted, that we're not sure if the bus lanes actually give you faster bus service.
Okay.
So you're getting bus priority from bus stop consolidation and from the in-lane bus stops.
Yeah, and then signal upgrades.
And we'll just convince more people to ride bikes. Thank you.
On that note, is the city still doing bus priority signal hits in places that like Eastern Washington has this feature, which it seems to work fairly well. But
In general, we are doing that throughout the city. I don't know if it'll be included in this project again, because we're not proposing to touch the Teal Square and Route 16 signals, and I don't think bus priority at Moore Street is something that would necessarily improve bus operations. But in general, that's something that we continue to look at doing where we feel like it will improve bus operation. But in future projects that look at Route 16 and look at Teal Square, I'm sure that we will look at signal priority for buses and how that could possibly play in.
Let's hear from Ted, then we'll open it up to guests.
Yeah, well, first of all, a shout out and a thank you to the city for putting this together, given all of the variables. It's exciting to see this happen. I think we've been talking about plans on this stretch of street since like for as long as I've been on the bike committee, so maybe 2017. So kudos to see this getting realized. And I share Greg's idea about paring down that the buffer on the north side there a little bit to make room for a bike facility. Things missing at this intersection, maybe a bike box for both the straight and right turn lanes, regardless of whether or not the full bike lane is feasible. I mean, I do think this is almost equally, if not more dangerous in an intersection, more so if you're approaching it. It's out of scope of this project, but something to consider. And I don't have a perfect solution for the other problem that I see, which is Clarendon Avenue, and maybe raising awareness that there are bikes there. That tends to be a turn that cut through traffic going to Mass Ave, takes it a fairly high speed when possible. So I think anything that can be done to de-incentivize that left turn or that left turn at high speed would be great. So I don't know if the design implication is just relying upon the width of the buffer and the slight chicane there to do that, but that's something I see, or if it's just sort of the traffic itself will help mitigate that, but that's another trouble spot.
Thanks, Dick. With that, guest members of the public, any questions or comments? I'll ask folks to keep it brief, but definitely curious to hear thoughts. Stephen, go ahead.
Be impressed with the detail and diligence which your committee goes into the engineering of these bike lanes and the streets. I have two areas of concern though. One, when it comes to the engineering, is youth. Well, you never distinguish as to what is seems to be acceptable to you as adult experienced cyclists and what is acceptable to you for younger, less experienced cyclists. Legally, does a 12-year-old ride on these bike lanes without?
I can take that question if you want.
How old is the cyclist?
My daughter is 8 years old. She has been riding a bike since before she turned 4.
I'm asking relative to legally, not your family.
There is no legal age limit for road users, sir.
So when you're making these rules, we don't distinguish as to whether they're for a 30-year-old like you or a 12-year-old.
Yeah, generally the design guidance we're trying to follow is 8 through 80.
8 through 80, okay. So what I would raise from the engineering standpoint is these are designs for 8-year-olds, number one. Otherwise, in the engineering standpoint, you people are extraordinary. I would go to the process. One of the things I'd point to is time after time in these presentations, it's quite appropriate that you gray out the area that is not the thoroughfare. Because effectively, as a bicycle advisory committee, you're graying out those people and those property interests. In terms of the people along this corridor, for example, you have people that are going to dine, going to shop, going to get healthcare, going to religious operations, going to other things, miscellaneous. And they're not part of this design, nor are they part of the scrutiny, because you don't have a public hearing process. The traffic commission that you send this to via the mobility division does not have a public hearing process.
I
So
appreciate you.
while you might be a
Just please keep
bicycle
your comments
committee,
brief.
while you might be a bicycle committee that is capable of putting a bicycle lane on the moon, you don't take into consideration all of the users, whether it's age or proximity, whether it's religion,
my 8-year-old.
dining or shopping.
And
you
this
have to
is a
do-
public process meeting.
Yeah, we're getting
what's
derailed
that?
here.
Excuse
Can we
me?
call order to the meeting, please?
Okay. Thank you for your comment. As I've asked for comment to be brief, with that, that'll conclude this comment. Any other brief comments?
Would you like to go to the Q&A?
Yes, let's do a Q&A.
As I read before, Zachary mentioned Russell Endicott concepts of 1 and 2, possibly to have the raised crossing intersections with the sidewalk level bike lanes on both sides for that section of Broadway. And he clarifies the sidewalk level bike lanes on both sides instead of just the north side. So for the screen, we'll have to move over to the left to see the Russell Endicott concepts for clarification. So I think this is a question to the city. Is it possible for concepts 1 and 2 to keep the raised intersection to raise the bike lanes on concepts 1 and 2 for the south siding?
I'll say, I think that is similar to something that we're capturing in our committee comments. That suggestion overall. Hey, any other questions in the Q&A?
Yes, Joe Paul talks about Gregory's comment, and we're now talking about Teal Square, about taking this buffer space on the north side so we can extend the PBL to Teal. They mentioned that they at a recent meeting, they said they can't do that because of the bus stop there. There is a bus stop there. I think that's up to the city and engineering to figure out whether you can move the bus stop or make sure that the protected bike lane, if we can get it through Teal Square, work with it. In the comments, I also made a different answer to that. Is that we could possibly make a I don't know, Cambridge Street has it by the new library. It's a shelf that you continue riding on as a bike lane, and the bus can easily go up the curb, kind of like what we have with a curb situation at Beacon Street. And that is it for Q&As if no one else has anything.
Thanks, Mark.
I did have a couple of quick questions.
Go ahead, Ted. Yeah, I'll just know time-wise, definitely want to hear comments.
Yeah, I know we're over, so I'll do this quick. To a point that Greg put in the chat, if possible, could the cross section be raised by that Clarendon Ave up towards the Teal Square end? Tom, if you can scroll over. If that could also be raised, or at least that side street crossing there, either if the Clarendon Ave sidewalk was raised, that would at least probably reduce car speeds, or if that entire intersection could be raised, that entire strip be raised there, that would probably be a safety improvement for both cyclists and pedestrians crossing the street.
That was Clarendon Ave. To clarify, it does look like that crosswalk would be raised, but I think we can also note this intersection as a concern.
Yeah. And I think just to make clarification of something I heard earlier, I believe that this is currently a public comment period in which the city is gathering feedback from multiple city committees in addition to some ongoing public comment period directly. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, we're currently in the second public feedback stage of this project, and in our city update, we'll talk about some of the upcoming opportunities as well as some of the outreach events that we've already done.
Do we have a city website we can put in the chat on this project so they can view other areas where they can participate if they feel like it?
Yeah, so if there is, I can try and dig it up.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can put a link to the chat later. I got it.
Do we want to make a vote on this?
Yes. Yes, thank you for the suggestion. I will briefly recap the main points that I have, and we move to a vote to submit a comment making those points. Briefly recapping these points, we strongly support this design overall. Regarding the intersection at Aylor Parkway, I'll give you a copy of this in a minute, Alex. We're very concerned about the intersection overall. We suggest working with DCR to continue the bike lane to the intersection. In the short term, we suggest working with DCR to add bikes may use walk signal and no turn on red at Aylor Parkway. For the westernmost unsignalized crosswalk, we strongly prefer concept 2, the northern curve extension. So pedestrians have space between downhill cyclists and the vehicular travel lane. And we suggest following in again from PTAC on that crossing. For the Russell Ave and Russell and Endicott neighborway connector concerns, we worry the concept 2 would have overly sharp turns. We prefer concept 1 with the raised intersections, and we suggest raising the bike lane in both directions to avoid a roller coaster. Other intersections, we're concerned with the bus stop near Belknap and cars turning right at Clarendon Ave. The intersection at Teal Square, it's a very stressful intersection, but very close to a very safe bike connection. So we suggest finding a way to extend the bike lane through there by reclaiming the right turn lane or repurposing some space from the buffer on the north side. So no, that didn't capture every comment, but I believe those are the main comments that we heard a lot on. With that, I will move that the committee endorse those comments regarding this design. Seconded by Ian. We'll do a roll call vote. Tom Lamar. Aye. Lena.
Aye.
Ted Feldman.
Aye.
Gregory Ely.
Aye.
Alex Frieden.
Aye.
Mark Bollinger.
Aye.
Ian Woloshyn.
Aye, and
Did they freeze?
Abstain.
I think the city froze.
All right, that concludes the vote. So the comments were endorsed and I will submit those to the city. With that, I will hand it over to the city update. I do not anticipate any further votes in the committee at this time. And I will, knowing that we are behind schedule, I will leave at the city's discretion any items that should be postponed.
I think we can run through this pretty quickly. So update on our member recruitment, we have made offers to 7 new members who have accepted and gotten the recommendation of the mayor. Next steps, we need to seek city council approval, which we are hoping to be able to do next week. And then following that, the new members will need to be sworn in by the clerk's office. Once those steps are completed, then there'll be new members, and we're hoping that we can have everyone on board for our meeting in June. I know we've had some requests from the committee for someone from the clerk's office to come and address some of the questions about procedures and rules. So we are in ongoing discussions with them. They have asked for, if you all have any specific questions, I think I'd ask, similar to what we did for DPW this month, if the committee can submit questions for the clerk's office about any questions you have on procedures that we can share with them, and we will continue to see if it's possible for them to come to an upcoming meeting. But that's where we're at. Yeah, we're excited to bring some new members on board. And hopefully in June we'll have a larger committee.
With 7 new members, what would quorum be?
So we'll have to dig into our spreadsheet, but I think that it will be in like the current, with the current committee ordinance, I think it would go up by 4, so maybe it would be a little 11.
Okay. And that does not count ex officio members, or it does?
It does.
At this point, it still does.
Yeah, so we might be able to make, we'd have to change the ordinance to change ex officio counting towards quorum, which is something that we're continuing to see what's possible in the future, but yeah, for now, the quorum rules would stay the same as they are now. And yeah, just doing quick math, I think it might be 11, but
yeah, no,
don't
that's
quote me on that.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure I understand exactly how many people we need showing up per the oversight and all that, so.
We'll definitely make sure that we have that number. No.
Thank you.
Well, it's 7 new members, so 4, whatever the current number is plus 4, I guess.
Great.
It looks like we do have a Q&A question. Who is the mayor's appointee to the Bicycle Advisory Committee?
I am officially the ex officio appointed from the mayor.
Well, aren't we all sort of approved by the mayor? All of our member appointments are approved by the council and the mayor, correct?
I believe the question might be that in the ordinance, it says there are ex officios from different offices, like DPW, police,
Oh.
and there is one from the mayor, and I'm filling that position. There's one from OSPCD, that is Greg, and the one from the mayor is myself.
And a follow-up question is, what is today's official attendance?
That can be found on the meeting notes. Unless
We have quorum, I think, is the immediate answer. The official attendance, we'd have to look at the notes, which Alex is currently writing.
Yeah, there's 16 people, I believe, attended.
It's not, that's the members, not the guests.
Guess they're also here. Yeah,
Yeah, but they don't count for quorum.
yeah, correct.
We have 10 committee members.
And I believe we need 8.
Yeah.
Isn't that it? 8 is the number that we need, and we have 10.
I believe everyone's here except
members.
for
Yeah.
Councilor Burnley. We don't have quorum, we have problems.
Yeah.
But good question.
Some quick capital project updates, the Powderhouse Electric Parkway project. The contractor is scheduled to start up again in May. There's some remaining work that includes the final paving, tree plantings, and traffic calming. Spring Hill work continues. On Summer Street, there is currently construction to install stormwater infrastructure and bike facilities. And there is a construction meeting a Spring Hill construction meeting on the 15th of May. McGrath resurfacing, the sidewalks are currently being constructed between the Squires Bridge and Ruthville Road. We don't have final dates yet for striping and delineation on McGrath. Structural bridge work has begun for the Mystic Moffat bridges. There's also an upcoming meeting for that project on the 13th. And no changes on the McGrath Boulevard project, which is currently accepting comments on the pre-25% design, and we'll have a additional public comment period this fall. For the city's complete streets projects, Davis Square, no updates from last month, but we are, the city is working to schedule the final pavement and striping in Davis Square. Sidewalk construction has begun on Western Washington Street, and the project is scheduled for full completion before the end of 2024. This is very small, but as mentioned, we are currently in our community engagement phase for the conceptual designs for West Broadway. We have several design resources available on the project website, including the design that we just looked at, as well as the street view rendering that calls out some of the proposed elements. There's also a recording of the project presentation and the slides, some of which Tom showed earlier. We are collecting feedback on this design through the end of May. Upcoming, we have our feedback survey, which is open until the end of May. And we have currently scheduled outreach at on the street itself, a pop-up on May 14th that will be in the late afternoon at North Street. And we'll also be holding a pop-up at the Clarendon Hill Towers to engage with particularly the residents who live there. And we've done a number of public outreach events already, including a kickoff open house on April 13th. That was at the West Somerville Neighborhood School, a walk with PTAC, and yeah, several other tabling and virtual opportunities.
Does Lena have a question?
Oh, I did have a question. I was just curious because I know that the towers are being reconstructed right now and a lot of people are not living there currently, and just wanted to make sure that, you know, folks that may be living elsewhere while the towers are getting rebuilt, have a chance to, like, you know, respond to this stuff too. It's just a consideration.
Are you referring to the Somerville Housing Authority, the Clarendon? So
I just know that a lot of the folks in the area have had to move like during that time, and it's just a good thing to consider. Some, you know, folks may be coming back to that building once it's rebuilt, and they may not be living currently there as well. So just a consideration.
Yeah, yeah, I think that the Clarendon Hill Towers on Broadway, I don't think there's any construction going on there. There is at the Powder House, Somerville Housing Authority. I don't know what is that Clarendon Hill Residences. I'm not sure.
It's just, it's basically all just our neighborhood. I don't know which buildings are what. It's just, I know that there's a substantial rehoming and, you know, redoing of all those buildings like that also will be using the bus stop and all of that. So just a consideration.
Yeah, definitely.
Have you considered going to, I think the mayor announced like the pizza night at the park. I don't see it on here, but I don't know if this was made before she announced that. I forget what they're calling it, but something witty about slices or something.
Yeah, I think the first one of those was today. That was today. So yeah,
I know there's one at Llewellyn David Park, I think next week or 2 weeks from now. It's not quite this area, but it's close and, I don't know, Ward 7-ish, so just a consideration. I'm sure you guys have plenty of free time in the evenings, right?
There will be mobility.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and we were at the, we had Civic Day and Bike-Mon kickoff, and we, had materials for this project, so I think apart from the specific West Broadway events, we have materials that we can bring to more general, community events.
Okay, should we wrap it up? Tough Street, we finally got the soils report, so we're gonna, have to look at that. But so far it looks good, and we continuing the design, and we're hoping to come to the public sometime this summer and show the final, or not the final, but the latest design. Glen Street and Otis Street neighborways, we're working very closely with the two consultants that were got the grant through ARPA. And I was hoping to have a little bit more to show today. That would not have been enough time anyway. So the goal is that sometime in May, we will update the website, and then we can have a conversation maybe at next month's meeting. The community path lighting is moving forward, is exciting, and unfortunately it took me as a model, not to my liking, but so we will go forward with this linear lighting, and they are working towards the 100% construction documentation. And our hope is still that by the end of this year, we will have a continuous lighting on the community path.
Awesome.
Awesome news.
Yeah.
One question on the community path was, I saw the ramp by Joy Street is mostly done, but it's still fenced off. Is there a date on that?
No.
Okay.
We've been hearing imminent, so the MBTA has to do the sidewalk, the developer has to approve it, and then the city also has to approve it, so we're all like, what's going on? So it will happen sooner than later, but
cool.
There's still some, I think, some slight grading issues, and maybe a railing that is not entirely safe. But it looks good, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, it looked great. Then I was like, oh, it's still fenced off. I guess I live a long way.
Yeah,
that ramp must have been a engineering nightmare. It looks like, oh God, there's a hill, more hill. Oh God.
Yeah, although the first part being that temporary metal ramp, that mitigates a lot. And then and then it's actually I was on it, and it feels pretty fun. It's like the Lowell Street access.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Great for Brick Bottom.
Okay. Any other questions? With that, the last item is any public comment related to the city update. Since we're running late, I'll ask that I will open up public comment, but I'll ask that any comments be brief and on topic. Seeing none, that concludes that item and concludes our meeting tonight. All right. Thank you, folks. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.